Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to today's session of this course. Today we shall be looking at this short story titled A Rose for Emily, written by William Faulkner. William Faulkner was an American writer. He was also a Nobel laureate in 1949. Some of his important works include novels such as The Sound and the Fury, As I Lay Dying, Light on August and Absalom, Absalom. He has been particularly noted for this depiction of the fictional county which he named as Yoknapatawpha. This is quite similar to the way Narayan, the Indian writer, had created Malgudi as a fictional village. Yoknapatawpha County is based on Lafayette County, Mississippi. Faulkner himself had spent a lot of time in Mississippi, and it is considered that Faulkner is the only Nobel winner who was born and lived in Mississippi. The setting of most of Faulkner's work was in the American South. He talks about the American South and the many details of it with a mix of reverence and criticism. The themes that we find strung across the various range of his works, they are mostly about the old American South before the Civil War. It talks about within the context of the old economic and social order, the old aristocratic, the decaying settings, the cultural values, etc. We will also see much of it getting reflected in this short story, A Rose for Emily, that we shall be taking a look at. A Rose for Emily is a 1930 short story. This was the first short story written by Faulkner, and it was also published in a national magazine titled The Forum. The story is about a woman's great tragedy. As the title implies, it is about Emily, and it's considered that this short story it's one of the most famous an American has written. The title, Faulkner himself has referred to this as an allegorical title. The object rose, it itself does not appear even once in the short story. There is no direct or indirect reference to a rose, but the meanings, as Faulkner himself has stated, it's allegorical. There are layered meanings and multiple meanings that we can attribute to the rose. The rose could be a tribute to Emily, who at the outset of the short story itself, in the first sentence itself, we get to know that she has died. The rose could be a reference to Homer's body being perhaps compared to a dried rose. It could also be a reference to this Latin term sub rosa. In Greek legends, it indicates a gift of secrecy and confidentiality. Sub rosa, the literal meaning is under the rose, which means under secrecy, under confidentiality. The narrator, in this context, we get to know that he keeps the secrets of Emily, the secret life of Emily, as very confidential with a lot of secrecy until her death. It's only in the last segment, the final segment of the short story, we get to know the dark secret that Emily had been hiding all this while. A Rose for Emily can be summed up as a story that deals with the reluctance of the South to part with its old ways after the Civil War. We will find Emily's character being exemplified in that sense, the reluctance that she shows in becoming a part of the new order, in letting go. We will see all of those things in the short story. The context of the story is very important. It's only in this social historical context the meaning of the story becomes more accentuated. It is set in this period after the American Civil War, which happened from 1861 till 1865. The term which we use is post-bellum, after the Civil War. And the major characteristics, as we know, of the Civil War, what the Civil War made possible was the abolition of slavery. So we find a transition in the following decades, because there was an end of this previous slave labor based economy. This story is set during this period of Reconstruction, approximately between 1861 and 1933. And in the story, we also get to know that it's around the same time that Emily is born as well. And we find a certain sense of southern nostalgia personified in Emily's character, in the way the other characters respond to or deal with situations. We find this nostalgia for the traditions of the past, for the old glory and privileges, and we will find that in the persona of Emily, we also find a certain kind of a nostalgia even for dead bodies. Emily is a lead character about whom this entire story is getting written. She belongs to the aristocratic family in the south, and she's also part of this family, the Griersons. The Griersons, the entire family, the household, it itself can be seen as a symbol, a relic from the past, kind of a living symbol of the decaying southern aristocracy. We get to know that she is white. She also has a Negro servant, though it is set during a time when slavery has already been abolished. The intricacies of Emily's character we shall be taking a closer look at when we try to read through the short story. And we have the narrator, who is the one who's introducing this entire story to us. It's a first person narrator, but interestingly the narrator does not use I. We find we, us and our throughout. That's also something about the perspective, the storytelling perspective, that we shall be noticing. And there are also enough evidences in the story through which we can assume that it's a male narrator. There are multiple symbols in this short story. The Grierson family home itself is the most visible and the most dominant symbol over here, and we find that Emily's father and her relatives, the figure of the Negro, Emily herself, they all represent and personify different things. The taxes in Jefferson, we find at least 3 or 4 references to the mode of tax payment and how Emily is affected in that process. We find it through these references. We find Faulkner very effectively mapping a transition period from the old order to the new order. And there are these references to bodies, dead bodies to be precise, and they also represent the decay, this difficulty to let go. And we will find that the personal and the social historical, those elements are intricately woven in these symbols. And Emily's hair itself emerges as a very predominant symbol, and that also comes across as a kind of a reference, an indication of Emily's sexuality. And we find that the presence of her hair, it also serves this purpose of unraveling the mystery of the story, as we would see towards the end. It will be useful to take a look at this short story to notice how particular elements are used to accentuate the meaning making process. And it also gives us a sense of the kind of master storyteller, the master craftsman that Faulkner was, how he could bring in a lot of minute details, place them strategically in different points of the story, so that as a whole it begins to fit in really well. The story begins with this statement: when Emily Grierson died, our whole town went to her funeral. So we already know what the setting is, what the gravity of the event which already had, we already know the setting. We also get to know about the recent event, Emily's death. Notice the use of our right from the beginning. The narrator is not really alone here, it's more like a collective rendering. The narrator is also telling us about what the entire county, the entire province perhaps thought about Emily and her life. And in the first paragraph, we also get to know that Emily's house itself is this major attraction in that area, and nobody has seen that house at least in last 10 years. So there is a sense of enigma, a sense of suspense which is already getting built into the story. We'll find this continuous use of the pronoun us and our, continuing to indicate that the narrator is partaking in this collective narrative process. And this is how Miss Emily begins to get introduced. Alive, Miss Emily had been a tradition, a duty and a care, a sort of hereditary obligation upon the town, dating from that day in 1894 when Colonel Sartor, as the mayor, He who fathered the edict that no Negro woman should appear on the streets without an apron remitted her taxes. The dispensation dating from the death of her father on into perpetuity. This information is important in order to give us a sense of how things were before and how things are going to change. It talks about a mayor, Colonel Sartoris, who was perhaps working hand in hand with the aristocracy, who had come up with sartorial codes and rules for the Negro women, and who also had exempted Emily's father from paying the taxes. And when Emily continues to not pay the taxes, totally oblivious to this change of order and the change of rules, we come to know that Emily continues to live in this old order, which was in certain ways more comfortable and very convenient for her. We find the use of the term Negro throughout the story, and it is also a way in which the South had continued to address the black person. And towards the end of this paragraph, we find this: only a man of Colonel Sartor's generation and thought could have invented it, and only a woman could have believed it. Because Colonel Sartoris comes up with this strange logic that Emily's father had loaned money to the town, and this was a way of repaying them by exempting them from taxes. And when the narrator tells us that only a man of Colonel Sartor's generation and thought could have invented it, and only a woman could have believed it, we get to know two things about the narrator. One, he does not believe it himself. He does not belong to the older generation. He belongs to the newer generation, which believes in the new order of things, the new economic order, the new socio-political order, and who believes in this historical thing which happened, the abolition of slavery, which brought about a significant change in the way things were structured in and around America. And when he says only a woman could have believed it, he is also perhaps indicating that he is not one among them. So we get to know that the narrator is a young man who believes in the new order of things, who does not belong to the old generation, and it is a man. When we look at the ways in which Emily Grierson gets described, we also pay attention to the way in which her own physical frame had undergone a change. There is a reference to this incident when the aldermen, after having a special meeting of the Board of Aldermen, they come to Emily's home to collect taxes, and this is how she is described: a small fat woman in black. And we find in a later segment of the story one of the earlier descriptions about Emily, she being a small, thin woman wearing white. So we see this transition also affecting the way in which perhaps Emily responds to the changing circumstances, the changing socioeconomic conditions, and the shifting value systems. When these men came to Emily's house to demand for taxes, she has the audacity to tell them, I have no taxes in Jefferson, because she continues to believe in the old order where her father was exempted from taxes. And we also get to know that she is totally unwilling to change with the times, and she is extremely insensitive to the law of the land, and she thinks that she continues to enjoy certain privileges and certain positions and certain exemptions which were handed down to her over generations. And we also get to know that the way Emily's character is portrayed, particularly in this instance where she refuses to pay taxes, we do find that Faulkner is being critical of this attitude, but there is also a sympathetic way in which this gets portrayed, because it's about a woman who was at some point a part of the aristocracy, enjoyed certain powers in that context, and now she's extremely helpless, and that helplessness comes out in the form of this defensive attitude, this arrogant attitude. The sympathy with which Faulkner presents and portrays Emily is very hard to miss and quite admirable. If you look at the structure of the story, we will find that it is divided into different segments. When we come to the second segment, we are introduced to a different time period altogether, and this is how the time period is qualified. It is 30 years before the smell. The smell and the details around it, from where the smell came and what it had led to, that also forms the crux of the story. I will try not to include any spoilers in this. I would encourage you to read that read the story on your own and figure out what exactly the smell was about and what role this smell played in this story. And we do get a lot of these indicators about the timeline. The second segment begins to talk about 30 years before the smell and 2 years after her father's death, and a short time after her sweetheart, the one we believed would marry her, had deserted her. While giving the timeline, we are also being made privy to various incidents that happened in Emily's life. There is the smell episode. It's 30 years before the smell. It is 2 years after her father's death and a short time after her sweetheart had deserted her. Then we also find people complaining about the smell and the ways in which the law tries to intervene and not to intervene, and how the local people also take it upon themselves to get rid of the smell. We'll not go into the details of it. And then the story tells us after a week or two the smell went away. And here there's a description of Emily. This was 30 years before the smell, 2 years after her father had died. Emily is a slender figure in white. She got to be 30 and was still single. That certainly is a concern. It's the American South. It is the period after the Civil War, the end of the 19th century. It's a conservative attitude towards single women. So the town, the entire town is concerned that she's 30 and she's still single. And we also get to know that. And just before the second segment ends, we are being made privy to another horrific detail. After her father's death, Emily refuses to part with the dead body. She is adamant in insisting that her father is not dead. We'll wrap up this session by drawing your attention to the last segment in this second part. We did not say she was crazy then. We believed she had to do that. We remembered all the young men her father had driven away, and we knew that with nothing left, she would have to cling to that which had robbed her, as people will. When the narrator is telling us that we did not say she was crazy then, it also implies that now at the time of narration, the narrator believes that she is crazy now. So now it is important for us to keep these details in mind, which would also help us and lead us towards a better understanding of the rest of the story. I encourage you to read through the entire story before we complete this discussion. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.